So this is the second lesson of week 1, the sociological imagination. This is my first time teaching a hybrid course, so what I wanted to do was try out these YouTube videos and see if this is an acceptable substitution for in-class learning. Of course, you can't ask the same questions, we can't have the same discussion as we can in a face-to-face, but hopefully we can substitute some of that with the forums, with the discussion board. Since this is a hybrid course, we have less face-to-face time. Part of your participation credit will have to come from being more active in those discussion folders than in my other face-to-face courses. So today we're covering the sociological imagination. You should have read about this on pages 6 and 7, all the way up to page 9 at the very least. I did assign up to page 14, so you should have read a little bit about the early founders and the neglected founders, which we'll be covering more in class. So what does it mean to have a sociological imagination? What are some examples of the sociological imagination? What did C. Wright Mills mean to think ourselves away? And what does it mean when we're always in the process of structuration? So those are that's what we're covering today. And if the audio on this sounds broken up, it's because it is. What I've done is I've recorded myself in a few different clips and thrown them together. So if it sounds a little broken up, then that's what it is. Here's our buddy, C. Wright Mills. He's an American sociologist. Most of the ones that we're going to learn about are French or German. Sociology was really a European school of thought until the early 1900s. And even then, American sociologists were not taking it seriously. They were not as prominent as European scholars. But C. Wright Mills is a big part of sociology, and he defined the sociological imagination as the application of imaginative thought to the asking and answering of sociological questions. So we're going to unpack this first with describing how a sociologist gets from point A to point B. How does a sociologist think sociologically, and what does that mean? What does it mean to use our sociological imagination? So really, he's talking about social sciences translate private troubles into public issues. So what does that mean? It means that personal troubles, when repeated over time, when these become patterned, recurrent events, these become public issues. Personal troubles, they're not rare. The cause is not solely up to the individual. They can be studied through statistics or through other qualitative measures. We know that it's a big issue. It's a societal issue when it's happening over and over and over again. It's not just happening to one person or 3 people. We know that something besides this one person's psyche or this one person's personal life that may be in the dumps, it's not just their fault, whatever's going on. It's not just their problem. Something about society, something in some sort of social force some sort of social force is happening behind the scene here. There's something about the structure, about society, that is influencing these issues. So that way we can study it sociologically. So here on the PowerPoint, personal trouble examples would include homelessness. This homeless man just needs to get a job. That is certainly a prevalent thought. And while it's true that if maybe some homeless people clean themselves up, or apply themselves, or quit drinking, or applied for certain benefits, they would have better chances in life. And that's certainly true. But we know that homelessness is caused by many factors. It's not just one homeless person or 50 homeless people. We have millions of homeless in the country. And we can study that through multiple means. It makes it a sociological issue, a public issue. It's not a private trouble or a personal issue, because we can see how widespread it is. So my next example is domestic violence. So he hit her because she disrespected him. Was that the only reason why he hit her? Is this the only couple that has experienced domestic violence? No. Domestic violence is a widespread issue, and it's not solely because of, someone's, she opened her mouth, or she wasn't where she was supposed to be, or that man is just messed up and cruel. There's other issues at work here. There's social factors. These social forces are impacting our lives, and that's what's creating these public issues. The last example, kids who claim bullying just need to toughen up. If they had a tougher skin, maybe if they just fought back a little bit, we wouldn't have bullying. Well, we know that's not the case. There's a lot of issues that go into bullying. There's sexism and homophobia. We know bullying changes by cultural makeup of schools. So there are factors that go into bullying, and there's certainly not just one or two people who are being bullying. This is not an isolated case. This is something that can be studied sociologically. So when we see these issues, we can say, there's a pattern. Some sort of structural force is at work here. And it's not really this one person's fault per se. This is not an isolated incident. This is not just some one guy's trouble. There's a social issue here. There is a public issue. So how do we go from thinking about private issues and turning them into public issues? We look at the social context. What social factors are involved? Is there Ferguson, the events in Ferguson? Is this has police violence or people fighting back against the police, protesting against police brutality happened before? Yes. That's been documented. It's something that is recurring through history. It's not just one issue of one event spiraling out of control. This is a recurring issue. So what social factors are involved? Well, there's lots of racism, or I wouldn't say lots because that's not very sociological of me, but you can say that, there's perceived amounts of racism. There have been racist emails, racist views circulating among the Ferguson police. It's highly contested. It's very racialized. What is the historical context of the issue? Well, we can say, the historical context of black oppression. How far back you want to go in history would really be up to the sociologists, but we know that this didn't happen out of nowhere. Racial tension was high in Ferguson, even before this issue. And it had been around the country. This was not something that just popped up overnight. And can society impact this issue? Well, we know police brutality is an issue. This is not just a once-off. And even if you see the Ferguson outcome as justified, you can't really say that police brutality doesn't exist. This is something that does exist. It's an ongoing issue. It's a public issue. So how do we bring in police brutality against people of color, against young black men, such as Ferguson? Is this a random occurrence that can't be explained? No, it definitely can. It was a highly racialized issue. Police brutality is a sociological issue. Racial tension had been, ramping up in Ferguson. And there's so many other factors that we can factor in here. But can we study it? Absolutely. There's no part of Ferguson that we can just shrug off and say, oh, that's just those those out of control community protesters. No, there's a reason why they're protesting. It doesn't matter if you agree if they're good or not. It doesn't matter if you agree whether or not the homicide was justified. Right now, moral judgments are a little bit irrelevant here at this point in time. What we can say as sociologists is, can we study this? Does this have social connections? Is this a random singular event? No. So here we're using our sociological imagination. So if we see something like this on TV, we can go, that's a sociological issue. That's something that sociologists can study. That's not just an isolated incident. That's something that happens, and it's a problem. And maybe as sociologists we can study it, and some of us who are activists or people who are lawmakers can go, okay, let's do something about this issue. So the sociological imagination is really thinking like a sociologist. So here I have more examples of how personal issues can be framed versus public issues. Personal issues, suicide. We tend to think of suicide as a very deeply personal issue. We think, oh my God, they killed themselves because they were depressed, they were so troubled, they were alone, they had some sort of thing going on and they were depressed, and they killed themselves, and that's because they weren't strong enough, or they had mental issues or some sort. We consider that a deeply individualistic personal issue, but it's really not. Suicide is actually a public issue. There's a pretty famous study by a sociologist that we're going to cover later on in the chapter, who broke down reasons why people commit suicide. There were religious reasons. There were altruistic reasons. There was about, I believe, 6 or 7 different reasons that he found. So we found that there are patterns within suicide that can be based off social factors. We also know these days, so if you were approaching this using your sociological imagination, you could say, well, bullying could impact it, and bullying is a widespread problem. Things like income or unemployment might also impact it, so that might be a sociological issue. That might be a public issue. You don't have to have knowledge of these studies. You just have to be aware that these things are recurring. And if you can just critically think and link these things to other social factors, other social issues, you can see how it is kind of tied together. And that's kind of the building blocks to making a hypothesis, a sociological hypothesis. So when we think about rape or sexual assault, the example I have here is, who knows why a rapist operates? They're sick, twisted individuals. We're not psychologists. We don't study why the brain works, but we can study how ideas of gender and consent impact people and the likeliness that has on someone to sexually assault or rape someone else. There have been plenty of studies done on that. And we found that men are most likely to be perpetrators. Why is that? That's another question we can think about sociologically. Is that innate to men? No. Using our sociological imagination, we can look, well, those who commit sexual assault have very skewed ideas of gender and consent. So what is it about these dichotomies of masculinity and femininity? What is it about consent or lack thereof that perpetrators aren't getting, and how is that linked to masculinity? There are so many more questions we can ask. And the questions can kind of go on in many different directions, but that's just proof that we're using our sociological imagination here. We're taking this into a structural level. We're exploring social factors. We're not simply saying, oh, well, they're messed up, and leaving it at that. We're not seeing it as a singular incident or or someone's personal problem. It's a public issue. The last one I have here is unemployment. It's very similar to the homelessness one. If she could just clean herself up and tried harder, she could have a job. Well, we know that unemployment is caused from several factors. There's discrimination and laws that make it harder for married women and people of color to secure full-time work. So what does that mean for a straight white man who has a family? Well, there could be other issues, other factors at work. Maybe there's if you have any sort of misdemeanor or felony, it's much harder to find a job. There's so many blockages that prevent people from finding work. So when we find this over and over and over, we can kind of create a hypothesis as to why this happened. But first we have to really either observe it or think that it's possible that this may be recurring over and over. Like I said, we don't have to have the hard facts in front of us. We don't have to have these stats to just pull out of thin air. That's not really necessary to use our sociological imagination. It's just kind of transforming these various personal issues that we see every single day into public issues. So one that I don't have listed here, that I just thought of, would be media criticism. If we were to look at gender inequality in film, and I just picked a single film, that would be very easy to say, oh, that's just a problem of the film. But is it just a problem of the film, or is it a problem of the film industry? So if I saw Lord of the Rings, in which there are, I would say, a ratio of 15 men-ish to 1 woman, I don't quote me on the numbers there, but you know what I mean. The cast is full of men, with very few women in Lord of the Rings. So do I say, oh, well, that's gender inequality? No, you can't jump to that. You can't jump to that conclusion, but you also can't dismiss it as that's a singular film. Is there gender equality in other films in terms of representation? Let's go find out. Let's pay more attention. Let's just keep an open mind that that's possible. Let's see where sociological imagination takes us. And from there, we can kind of start to form hypotheses, start sociological research. Just opening your mind up and switching and kind of transferring your view set from seeing things as random, personal, private to being linked to the world around us is really integral to the sociological field and the study of sociology. So wrapping up with the sociological imagination, the book also describes it as someone using the sociological imagination, quote, thinks himself away from the familiar routines of daily life. Well, why would we need to think ourselves away? What is the purpose of that? Well, we come with a lot of biases, right? We're all raised to think a certain thing. Maybe not explicitly, but we all come from different backgrounds. We are a diverse class, we're a diverse city, a diverse country. So we're all coming with different assumptions about what is right or wrong, or what is normal for us, even our preferences. So what we concern ourselves with in daily life, why would I think about why homelessness exists? Why would I think about domestic violence on a large scale? I have nothing to do with homelessness, and I have nothing to do with domestic violence. There are so many things that we're just entrenched in that we don't really need to expand our minds on a day-to-day basis to get most of our work done, except for in sociology. So in sociology, we're really cracking that egg open, exploring outside of our comfort zones. There's definitely going to be some controversial topics in this course, but as long as we're engaging our sociological imagination, we can at least say that's a possibility, that's a good hypothesis. that would make for a good study. Or maybe just think you're right, that's maybe not such an isolated issue if it's recurring. And we can just pause and go, okay, tell me more. So that's why we really need to think ourselves away, is because we come with a lot of personal biases, and that's fine. Our ideas of ourselves and in our world around us, that makes us who we are. But in this class, we're really going to be expanding those to think of ideas outside of our normal daily lives. And once you start seeing things, you're going to start picking up on things in your daily life and going, that is sociological. Wow, someone could find something out more about that. So even, I like this a lot, on page 6 and 7, they talk about coffee sociologically. So even something as simple as a cup of coffee is so deeply entrenched in sociological meaning. Which really begs the question, what can we apply the sociological imagination to? What can't we? Just think about that. I would be hard-pressed to say I can't think of anything that we can't apply it to. Moving on into structure, what do I mean when I talk about the structure and the structural? So the structural is defined as the widespread recurrent hierarchies that influence our daily lives. So examples of this would be sexism, racism, media influence, religion. These are the big recurring big ideas of power that we have in society, these big structures, pillars of society, I guess you could also call them, tenets of society, and they have a lot of power over our lives. We basically pick up and learn everything from these things, from religion to the family as a unit. We learn almost everything from our family. The education system, and then also more insidious structures of ideas of race, ideas of gender. Those definitely morph our lives. So when the book talks about structuration, I don't really like its definition. It's kind of wordy, but structuration is a two-way process. Basically, structure shapes us. We shape structure, and this process occurs constantly. It basically allows our society to evolve and change. So 2015 Orlando is definitely not the same as 1965 Orlando or 2005 Orlando. So much has changed. And so society constantly changes and evolves, but how does it? Does it just up and change? Oh, it's 2015, get with the times, time to make gay marriage legal. No, society doesn't work like that. Something such as the same-sex marriage legal ruling was hard fought for. But why wasn't it passed 40 years ago if it was hard fought for? Which it was. There was just social factors that were getting in the way. So we definitely shaped our world. But for the time up until then, our world was also shaping us. Ideas of gay marriage were simply unheard of. It was up until 10 years ago. There was very low support. So how could we get a ruling to pass if no one believed in it? Well, we have to slowly change beliefs over time. And that applies to almost anything. So that's really what structuration is. Our structure makes us who we are. But in turn, over time, we also change the structure. So to illustrate this, I have some very detailed graphic artistic renditions of what structure is. So like I said, the structural forces kind of press down upon us. Ideas of gender and race. What does it mean to be Native American when we live in a country where there are almost no Native Americans that are full-fledged Native American? What does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be transgender? What does it mean to feel like a young black man in the inner city? Those are things that are pressed down upon us by structure, either by large communities that create the structure or other structures. Um, and of course, these are all imbued with things like norms and values. So, what is normal for a woman to act? What are the norms of being a woman? What are the norms of being a student? Well, as a student, you're expected to come to class, pay attention, respect the teacher, do your work, and get good grades. But it's more detailed than that. Why did we suddenly have to make cell phone policies when there weren't cell phone policies widespread 10 years ago? We had cell phones 10 years ago, but they weren't really widespread. They weren't really in the syllabus. Why not then? Well, because it wasn't normal for people to carry cell phones to class. People didn't take their cell phones everywhere. It was a kind of an emergency thing in case you got stuck on the side of the road in your car. Cell phones have a different meaning. We place different values on cell phones these days. So even a cell phone, we can think of that in a highly sociological way. But that is kind of, our ideas of that are built by the structure. Our structure could be capitalism or consumerism. So we say, oh, having a smartphone is so important. That builds status. That will make you seem important and trendy and flexible. There are so many things that come along with owning a smartphone. And besides its own utility, it means things to you and to other people around you. But where do those ideas come from? Well, it's part of consumer culture. It's part of the media. It's part of a capitalist industry. And those are all structural forces. So norms and values about just about everything come down from us, from the structural forces. Structural forces can also include historical discrimination, historical context. So when we think of what is the context, what are the social forces? Is there a history at work here? Well, when we talk about racism, is there a history of racism? Yes. Does racism disappear overnight? No. Does having a black president mean that racism, the lingering effects of, the Jim Crow era, does that mean they're suddenly gone? Well, the answer is no, but we can look at that sociologically. We can say, oh, there's the structural force at work. It's impacting us as individuals. It's creating who we are, our identities, how we see the world, how we interact with each other. And that's really that's sociology. Is recognizing these structures. These structures are doing something to us. But are we just passive recipients? Do we just become mindless, brainwashed zombies of whatever the man tells us to do? No. Which brings us to our next beautiful piece of work. As individuals, we also shape the structure. We have social movements. There are, just the current day, modern day, we have Black Lives Matter and Occupy Wall Street. But there's also things like the Tea Party movement and Anonymous. We can do change.org petitions. We can email our senators. We can become involved with our community, even if it's something small, like trying to get a new library or rally support for a local politician. It can be something really small. So in that way, we shape the structure as well. And we send back those norms and values. Our norms and values change over time. Do you have the same values as your parents? Probably not the exact same ones. What's changed? Are they different just because you're younger? Just because it's 2015? Because you're the next generation? No. There's been a lot of things that have changed. Do we become progressive for the sake of becoming progressive? No, not usually. Something is happening here. What are these social forces? Well, we are forming society. We're dictating what is important and not important. We're framing these issues. We're using our sociological imagination. Even people who are not sociologists have used their sociological imagination. I'm sure you have before taking this class and before even hearing that term. You have ideas of things that may need to change, things that may not have seemed important to other people, but you know that they impact a greater sphere. You're like, okay, this is something that is not just stupid, it's not just small, this is something big and I want to be a part of it. And so we also give back to society. And over time, that's generational change. We form new ideas, we push boundaries, sometimes out of rebellion, but sometimes out of, well, maybe this thing that our previous generation didn't work. Maybe it's time to explore it. So, but this also does not mean that as individuals we can simply just create society. Do we have all the agency? That's highly contested within sociology. You know, how much free will do we have? How much power do we have as individuals? Are we completely creating society? How much does society create us? And how much do we create society? That's a question that you definitely do not have to answer. A sociologist will argue about that on your behalf until the end of time. But really, that's what structuration is. So structuration is structure impacts us. We impact structure. This goes back and forth until we create something new. We change. We're in a constant state of flux. Sociology is a moving target. It's not Latin, it's not a dead language, it's not something, even though in the hard scientists, we make, things that really change the foundation of what we believe. Sociology is constantly shifting, which is why the sociological imagination is so important. We have to kind of step back from where we are, unpack our biases, take a look at where we've come from, acknowledge certain privileges, in order to view things from a distance. Can we completely remove ourselves? No. But what we can do is we can critically think about our world, critically think about our society, use our sociological imagination to start thinking sociologically. And that's where we're going to go with the course. We're going to be thinking about occasionally some controversial things, some things that you may have never even thought of before, and that's okay. That's the reason why introduction to sociology exists, introductory sociology. You don't have to be a sociologist coming into this course, but you will be required to think like one. And that may take some brainstorming, and it may take some talking it out, thinking it out. That's fine. That's what the course is for. So we're here to really learn more about social forces and how social forces impact our world. The next step, next week, we will be talking about social theory. And we're going to spend a week on social theory. Because now that we have kind of explored our sociological imagination, let's go back and look at what these other famous sociologists who have really made a deep impact on sociology have to say. Why do they think crime occurs? Why do they think society functions? They've got some really great answers. So we're going to go through that, go through our social theorists. And these theories can kind of support your little daily hypotheses of why do we have an underrepresentation of female characters in media? Why is homelessness an issue? Why does domestic violence create these patterns? So we're going to go through these issues. And we're going to think about these things sociologically using theory. And then from there, this is still all in the first chapter. The first chapter is, incredibly dense. It's an incredibly dense chapter, which is why we're going to take about the first 3 weeks to really unpack it, because there's a lot there. There's a lot happening in the first chapter. We're going to look at research methods. We're not going to go too deep because research methodology is 2 to 3 courses at UCF for sociology majors. But we're going to go over it for a day or two. How do sociologists conduct research? How does theory come into play with research? And what is the research process? So that's kind of where we're going with the course. Again, I'd like your feedback on the module, the lecture module. I figured, if I'm hard to understand, I would also like your feedback on that as well. This is how I sound during class. This is how I lecture. So if you're having trouble understanding me, or understanding professors in general. So that's it for today, but I did want to go over a few things before I end this. One, please give me feedback in the discussion forum somewhere. Yes, that will count towards participation credit, but please give me something constructive, or let me know how this how this was in terms of learning. I will get better with this. This is a new experience for me, so if you're worried that I talk too slow, or maybe I have like a small lisp, let me know if that blocked you from really learning, or if it was difficult to understand. Those are things I can try to improve upon. In terms of audio quality, that's not really something I have a lot of control over, but if you did think it was low quality and you had trouble understanding me, let me know. Also, I wanted to go over the schedule really quick. You can see that on Monday we don't have class, so I won't be seeing you until the 14th. So Monday I'm going to have the same kind of lecture online. Thursday, as usual, I'm going to have the same kind of lecture online. By Monday, you need to have read pages 15 through 21 and 104 and 105. This goes over sociological theory and a little bit on theory that's a little further ahead that I wanted to include. The theory post is on the discussion board. It's should be about 3 paragraphs, maybe more, and you do have to reply to one other person's post. So that's due before Monday, so you should be working on that after this lecture, or find time between now and Sunday night to complete that. You need to have the discussion done, I would say, by Saturday, so that someone has time to reply to yours, because it is required that someone reply to another person's post. So don't wait until the last minute. That's kind of short, disadvantaging your classmates. So just get it done, don't wait till the last minute, so everyone can reply to each other's posts. Thursday we're going to have a quiz that's due by Thursday, and by Thursday, when I'm going to release the lecture, I'll be finishing up theory. As you can see, we're going over theory a lot. It's very dense, it's very difficult. So over the next 2 weeks, you need to be active in the discussion. You need to be active on the boards. Really, the first month of class is the most dense. It's the most difficult. I'm not going to lie, it's probably going to be the most difficult part of the entire semester. So you need to be active, you need to be involved, you need to be reading and taking notes. If not on the lectures, then on the book, whatever works best for you. Ideally both, but I know that I asked some questions throughout this module, throughout this lecture. I said, what can't we apply the sociological imagination to? What examples can we think of? How does the sociological imagination affect your life? So since I've asked questions in a lecture, those would be perfect to go on the discussion board and talk them out. And that will be participation credit. So because we're a hybrid course, participation credit is still something that you need to keep on top of. I'm not going to tally it for you. I'm not going to tell you. That's something you need to be actively involved in. Because for sociology, especially for a hybrid course, you really need to talk these things out. These are concepts that need to be talked out, especially in the first chapter, because these are so dense. So as you can see, by week 5, you have a theory paper due. So what we're going to do is we're going to build upon theory and method through the next 3 or 4 weeks. It's going to be difficult. These concepts are pretty advanced, but the book trusts intro students to be able to learn them, so that's what I'm going by. So what we're going to do is we're going to build upon social theory and methods, and we're going to kind of create a proposal. The paper is not that long, the posts are not that long, but we will have a good amount of work. It's going to be work every week, reading every week, discussion board every week. So it's going to be a very active class. But the work is not difficult, and I've structured the class so that it's, as long as you do the work, it's going to be very hard to fail. But if you have any questions, I'm available by email. I'll be on the discussion boards regularly. I intend to help people where they need it. So as long as you do the work, put yourself out there and attempt and ask questions when they need to be asked. If something needs to be clarified, then I will clarify it for you. I fully intend to be there for the class. That's kind of my teaching philosophy. So that's it for this week. The next module will be up by Monday, but like I said, you have a theory post that's due by then, so that's next on your agenda. Again, give me feedback, answer some of those questions I posed during the lecture, or just give your reaction to the reading, something to just show that you're being active in this class, and that can all be found under the discussion boards.